Hi everyone, welcome to Wandering DMs. I'm Paul.
And I'm Dan. Today on Wandering DMs, we're going to be thinking about what do you do when a player knows the adventure you're planning on running. You know, we've run into that awkward situation a number of times. We have solutions, and we're going to run them down here today. All that and more on Wandering DMs.
Before we begin the conversation, I will remind everyone, as always, at the end of the show, we will be hosting our after party chat. That is a live video chat hosted by Dan and I on our private Discord server, and you can join in. Just visit our Patreon at patreon.com/wanderingdms and join at any tier. Part of the many benefits you'll get for that is an invite to our Discord server. Get your accounts all set up, log in, be ready. About 10 minutes after the show, we will be there live.
You know, Paul, I love the live chat that we get during our actual broadcasts, and I also love the after chat to connect a little bit better on our Discord server. We just have the best patrons here at Wandering DMs on our Discord server. For example, Vacuous is checking in that we're currently live on YouTube and Twitch, so thank you for that.
Sometimes when the chat is lively, I love watching the chat go by as we're doing the show, but sometimes when it's quite lively, which fills my heart with joy. It's hard for me to follow it, right? Because we're doing the show, we're trying to talk to each other, trying to, keep tabs on a dozen different things. So actually, like watching and reacting to the chat is not always the easiest thing for us. So having that ability to actually directly talk to folks at the end of the show is actually really nice.
It's a bit of an embarrassment of riches, frankly. So usually when there's some great point someone made in the live chat here that we missed, and then we get to go do the live after chat, and everybody gets to point out the thing that was like really, really important. And we're like, right,
the crucial thing that we totally missed on the show. Yeah,
totally. And then we go to Discord, and then we're chatting about it the rest of the week. So anyway, that's what's normally happening for us here at Wandering DMs. So, Paul, we have run into this issue a couple times recently of sitting down, and I think recently it's frequently been like right at the last minute. It might be the case of we're doing a convention game, and you have some people that have signed up for the game. And I know what happened. Like I was in a game at our house convention back in April this year, wherein and frequently me and our friends like to rerun experience classic published adventures in D&D or Call of Cthulhu or Star Frontiers or something like that. And so we might have a convention game. A number of people have signed up. The runner is running some kind of classic game, and one of the people at the table get like about 20 minutes into the game, and they were like, "Oh, I've played this 10 years ago." and I didn't recognize the title. And I didn't recognize it from the description, but now that we've got the characters on the table and now I remember this first encounter happening. Hey, DM, I've already played this, and so it could be that someone's played it a decade ago. It could be that they happen to have read a recent publication that we're testing or something like that we published. That happens a couple times. One of the things I'm personally worried about these days is the lovely cartoon run-throughs that Jason Bradley Thompson have made, lays out some of these classic D&D adventures that I personally love. And now, Paul, you have decorated about half your house with those Jason Thompson things, and our friend Max is the same. Them, yeah. And actually, I walk through when I'm at your place. I walk through and go, "Oh man, this is a whole single image visual about how to get through this thing." And I fear that I'm going to run into this situation where you guys know it now. They're very.
As Steve K points out in the chat here, this just happened just a month ago live on our channel with Skull Mountain. It happens that when we do the birthday game, like that's usually a chance for us to say, okay, I've run a lot of convention games, little 4-hour slot games. I would love to run something that is slightly longer than that, not full campaign length, but 8 hours or 12 hours worth of gaming. and then usually I'm looking through my stuff of like, okay, what would be good to fill that spot, and then often I'm left with the problem of, well, what of those things do I have that none of the players at the table have
Yeah.
played before? And I picked Skull Mountain because I knew you were coming up, and Max and Lauren were going to be there, and I was like, this is great. None of you have ever played Skull Mountain. I used it in my old campaign, a decade ago. And then Mike told me he could come at like kind of last minute. He was like, "Oh yeah, I could totally come by." And I love playing with Mike. I was so glad he could come by, but he's totally played that adventure before. And I had to have this message with him over text where I said, "All right, I'd love to see you there, but we're going to be running this adventure, which I've used in our campaign." And his immediate response was, "Oh, Dan, can you still hear me?"
I can.
Oh,
It looks.
yep. Okay.
The screen looks
Sorry,
fine on
had a
my
little
end.
internet.
Yeah.
Had a little internet hiccup there on my end for a second there. So apologies if I got cut off. But yeah, and Mike said, "Oh, no big deal. I never remember anything. Like I don't." He's like, "I don't care."
This here is my and what that's a great example of, you've already put the prep work in, you've already set up, and the way we do it, we do quite a bit of legwork before running a game session to make sure that we understand it and it's going to work smoothly and stuff like that. And then someone else pops in and they want to, and I love having more players rather than less. And I'm not in a situation where I can entirely redirect the entire adventure that I've prepped. And you definitely want to say yes, and you can come. And what the hell are we going to do about this problem?
You make a good point too about it coming up at conventions. I think you're especially prone to it because the fact is, a lot of times when I'm rerunning an adventure, it's because it sings, right? I love this adventure. I ran it once; it was fantastic. I want to see, can I do that more times? And the best way to do that is to go run it at a convention. Great, new players, right? Like if I want to run the same adventure more than once, then I'm going to have to go find a new player group. And what better way to do that than at a convention? And for sure, the most awkward, like at least at the convention, you have the listing. You can say, I'm running this module written by this person, etc. You can put the information out there, but that still doesn't protect you from the person who doesn't remember and shows up, and then 10 minutes or 20 minutes into the game, they go, oh yeah, I have played this one. Like, great. Well,
yeah, exactly. Or we're going to be in the awkward position once in a while with our dungeon design dashes that we'd love to do, that we design on the air here live in about 60 to 90 minutes, and then we want to play test it. And a good way to do that is maybe we'll go to a number of conventions and do that. And we might be in the situation where people either don't remember the title, possibly, or maybe if we're fortunate enough and we don't offend people too bad, they might want to experience, like, what's it like for the wandering DMs to actually run their own adventure that they knew about. Stream actually is a thing that could possibly happen. So I think we were close to that happening at RPG Con back in late April here this year. So there's a bunch of different ways you could do that you could run into this particular situation. Now, the first solution, in my experience, is exactly what Paul just said with our wonderful friend Mike, is that I'm personally always astonished at how little the players remember. I'm continually just agog when I find out how almost nothing many players remember about an adventure that we've gone through. And I think I understand why I'm personally shocked at this, is that I pore over these things like a rabbinical scholar. So I reread and analyze and highlight and annotate, and some of us were doing spreadsheet work late last night on the Discord server, actually. And so I've inspected, thought about, run through, software simulated these things over and over and run them many times, possibly. That what I feel is the basic, like, level of knowledge to know this adventure is way overshooting the mark. It's way overshooting. Yeah. So for starts, it might not be a problem at all, because many people aren't going to remember it if they only played once.
Well, there's probably a big difference between a player who has played it once before and a player who has run it as GM once before. I don't think
Yeah.
the latter I've ever encountered. But the player who's played it before, it's more akin, I think, to watching a movie or a TV series a second time, right? And I do that just as a just for my own entertainment. Certainly, there's plenty of movies
Yeah.
or TV shows that I've seen once, and I'll go back to them, especially if there's been a long gap. I think just recently I started rewatching the Breaking Bad series, and I'm like, I basically know the broad strokes of it, but I'm still like, it's been long enough since I watched this series that I'm still surprised, episode by episode about the things that go down.
That's actually a really good model for me to have in mind. We here are rewatching maybe for about the third time Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and I just came by a particular episode. It's like around season 10, and I go, oh, every time I see this, I forget that game executive that shows up is a ringer. He's fake. That doesn't show up until the end, and every single time I get surprised by the reveal at the end of the episode. I'm like, I really feel like I had to remember that from now on.
That's funny. That's funny. And then, another another aspect I think that's worth talking about here is like, how impactful is it to have experienced the adventure before? And a lot of that comes down to the adventure design, like what's it about, how much surprise
Yeah.
content is there, right? It's going to be pretty different, I think, if you're running a classic dungeon crawl versus, say, an investigative or like a horror game or something where there's a lot of like, big surprise scares. I feel like I'm a lot less worried when it's a dungeon crawl, right? Because I'm like, the fun here is the mechanics of us, exploring and how we operate as a team and how the combats go, and like enough of those factors are that just going to be different the second time, just because the players are different.
Yeah. I guess I should mention that there are some, like William just put in the chat here. Let's put this up here. Is, for starters, you might just swap out a particular key detail or a monster or something like that on the fly. You can probably do that. That's probably not introductory level DMing. That's going to be at least sophomore level DMing to be confident enough that you can swap that out without entirely breaking the adventure. That's something like that. I will point out that, and I don't think that this is a super common thing in publishing today, but I can think of a couple examples back in the 80s of adventures from the maker of D&D that were specifically set up with some kind of key at the start that would radically scramble up the contents of the adventure. And you might be able to guess. We've done one live play on the stream here with you and me, Paul. You probably won't be able to remember it, but some of our viewers will probably remember the Ravenloft, right? The first Ravenloft adventure that is keyed to a card shuffle. I think I've never actually run that, but I think it's keyed to a card shuffle from a fortune teller at the start, and depending on how those cards come out, the contents and location of key things in the Ravenloft castle are all in different places, different situations. So you could run some, that's set up to help you out. And the other thing that we've run on the stream is for the classic Marvel superheroes, the Face Rip Marvel superheroes game, the Thunder over Jotunheim, the adventure with Thor in Asgard that we ran, Paul. Same kind of thing. Is there's an initial choice by the player from like, which magic item would you like? These 6 things, and depending on which one you pick, all the contents of the whole adventure are all scrambled up. And the main goal that you need to is a different piece of content in a different location.
Yeah.
So you can run that at least 6 times and basically be different.
Yeah, for sure. That's that's rare. I mean, I can imagine, like, if you're, again, like, I've played this adventure before, like, what does that even mean? If you're, I don't know, playing with a bunch of geomorphs and tables, right, at some level,
right,
it's a random adventure every time, right? Or if I point at a game like Fiasco, I play the same play set all the time. Why wouldn't you? Because it has almost no impact, right? The game is definitely going to be radically different, regardless of the play set that you started with.
Right.
So
If
yeah,
you're
I guess
playing outdoor
possibly
survival, if you're playing classic D&D Wilderness on the outside survival map, where it's just entirely based on the random monster tables, is essentially the play. That won't be the same. But frankly, the more finely tuned, the more finely written the adventure is, maybe in a more modern style where you expect that kind of thing post 1980 or so.
I mean,
That's going to be more fragile, I guess, in this sense.
before we dig too much more into like techniques for dealing with the problem, I think it is like the one thing I want to lean into a lot is like talking to the player and finding out like, you know, why do you want to play it again, or how much do you remember, or how
Right.
can we alter your play experience, such that that doesn't become a problem, right? Like I'll talk about like my conversation with Mike, right, where he was like, yeah, I know you used some of this content, but whatever, I barely remember it, and if something jogs my memory, I'll just keep it to myself. Like that's the easiest thing, right? The easiest thing, okay, great, you're still going to enjoy yourself and you're not going to screw with anybody else's fun. Great, no problem. um
Yes.
I've an anecdote that is the polar opposite of this, which is I had a player who was, when I was running my long running D&D campaign. I think I've talked about this before, that I like this kind of quilt maker analogy of, I loved to make a big open world that the players could explore with lots of clues and let them kind of pursue whatever makes them interested, and then individual details I would populate with pre-written material. So here's a fun dungeon, I'm going to shove it into the world
Yes.
over here,
Yes.
right? So I do use a lot of pre-written material, but then I incorporate it into the larger story, the larger whole of what's going on in the world,
Right.
and that's really fun for me. Well, I had a player who I discovered realized I was doing this and was actively looking up the adventures so that he
Yeah.
could win. Right?
Yeah.
Like, so his goal, he wanted to play stuff he had read. In fact, he wanted to read it ahead of time so that he could optimize his play and, quote, win
Yeah.
the adventure. Which annoyed the crap out of me when I discovered that was happening. And slowly over time, like I was trying to like tease out, is this really what's going on? So I would do something like, we're playing a specific adventure from pre-written, published. I think we were doing some piece of Stonehell actually. I just moved a treasure. Like, nope, this treasure that was hidden here, it's hidden there now. And sure
Yeah.
enough, when they got to that spot, he's like, oh, I searched the floor for a trapdoor, and I'm like, nope, there isn't one. And he's like, what? Are you sure? Search really closely, right? Like he thought I was making a mistake,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
And I'm like, oh, because clearly you've read it before. And this really started to irritate me, and it got to me to the point where I started to kind of like passive aggressively, like really change stuff, right? Okay,
Yeah.
let me radically alter this dungeon in such a way that if he comes using this pre knowledge of this, it's actually going to screw him up rather than help him,
Right.
right?
Right.
Just to zing him, right? I guess I was, yeah, whatever. Was that wise? I don't know. It was amusing for a moment, but ultimately it spoils the whole reason of using pre-written material, because now I got to write my own content. Like, what the hell? That's the whole reason I'm using pre-written content, is so that I can optimize my own time better. And then eventually I just realized, I think eventually I actually confronted him about it. And of course, not of course, but his reaction was to deny. No, absolutely. I don't do that. No way. I would never do that.
Okay.
And
Interesting.
then eventually just realized like it was I'm like, okay, this is going to irritate me to the point that I don't want to deal with this. And eventually the end result was that I simply doesn't get the invite to the table anymore.
Yeah.
So
I want to dig into
yeah,
this. I want to dig into this because I find this very interesting on a number of reasons.
I wanted to bring this one up because I always remember your anecdote of dealing with players who were always trying to peek behind the screen. Yeah.
Well, that's what I was going to. I was going to ask was how long ago was this, Paul?
It was probably 15 years ago.
15 years ago. Okay. Because I feel like I used to tell you the story, and I've probably said it on the stream at least once or twice, but in high school, I had a really degenerate game group, like middle high to high school, that went in this direction. And I think the first, and early on when we became friends and I told you about this, your reaction to my story was like, that's crazy. Who would do that? That's just nuts. I've never heard anything like that before ever. So I'm very happy that you have also now experienced the same thing. I'm very relieved that it's not some crazy, unbelievable thing that I've fallen into. But in high school, we did get into this competitive this competitive back and forth, and it went on for a while. And I think particularly when we were running the series, like the big, well-known D&D series at the outset, the Giants Drow, Queen series, which goes quite a while. So once you know that you're playing one of them, you immediately know the next 7, products that you're going to go through. And so I think the first thing that happened is that one of my players thought it was funny that if I turned around, went to the bathroom, that they'd grab the adventure and start looking at the map and run through that before I got back in the room. And then I think I was coming, and then I think I found that out, and I think I got a locking briefcase. I got a combination locking briefcase, put all my stuff in the combination locking briefcase, locked it, left, and then the guy got creative enough that he got a lockpick set. And now the challenge was he's actually picking the actual lock, right, and learning how to do that in order to get into my locked briefcase and in order to go through the adventure notes then. And then at some point, I never left them out, and then they were just purchasing the product or something like that back in the day. So it got pretty bad.
The internet has made this problem way harder, right? Because now they just go look up the PDF for $1 or $2 on drive-through or free. And it's very easy, right? Yeah.
Countered by the fact there's just so much more product out now. So there was a point in 1980 where there was, at some point there was one adventure. At some point there was one adventure, and so I'm talking about the point when there were 10 adventures ever published by the makers of D&D, and once you knew we were on one of the paths, was half of all the products that had been published to date.
I don't know if our point here was to discuss cheating, but cheating. Okay, so if they're after cheating, right? Ultimately, I'm reminded of the same kind of nonsense I face in the day job of writing software, right? Like, how do you deal with people who are trying to hack your game?
Yeah,
and the problem that frequently comes up here, and I'm sure it scales to just you're the DM of your local D&D group, is there are more of them than there are of you. That if you spend a lot of your time trying to write code to prevent hacking, it's wasted effort because there are way more people trying to hack your game than there are people trying to prevent hacking. Right? There's just a lot more time and energy for it, and most of the people who are doing it just because they want to be able to say they did it, right? Not because they desperately want a free copy of your game. It's because they want to be able to say, I did it, I cracked that game.
That was part of my anecdote there was part of that.
Yeah. And then, so part of the analysis, some of the discussions I've had professionally around this, really focus in on okay, well, what harm is being done, right? Are we losing sales? These people who are cracking our game probably wouldn't have bought the game in the first place. If that was the only option. Are they making the experience worse for others, for paying customers? Right. Okay, that's a problem, right? If they're screwing up the leaderboard or griefing other players in a multiplayer online game or whatever. One of the companies I worked for, the classic thing to do was we actually set up a separate secondary server for cheaters. And the moment when we put a lot of effort into detecting cheating, but we did not attempt to fix it, we simply migrated anybody who was detected as cheating into the cheater server. Great.
Oh.
They can go all pile on each other and make their leaderboards say stupid numbers and grief each other all they want. Fine. As long as they're not affecting the other players, who cares? They're still paying us to play the game. Whatever.
I don't recall you ever telling me this. That's and this was done in a shadow way. They weren't informed that was fascinating. Right. Fascinating. Yep.
Oh. They were isolated onto their own server, the cheater server. And they all cheated each other, and we all enjoyed that. Yeah, right. They're paying a monthly fee to pay the game anyway, or whatever it is. And this was a freemium game, so they're paying money for the content, etc. And they enjoyed cracking it. They enjoyed breaking it, and they broke it for each other. And fine, go nuts. Right. So a little bit. So back to you're the DM. You have a group of 6 players. One of them is cheating. Start by asking yourself, is it making the game worse for everyone else? Right. If it's not, then so what? Let them cheat. Who cares? Let go.
Oh boy. Okay, now I'm not. That's not my personality, right? And I've gotten in trouble in other contexts recently where other people go, why did you pursue that? And I'm like, that's just what because I'm fucking lawful good, asshole. That's why. That's all.
But if you want, like, okay, so if you want to, like, okay, yes, I hate this. It irritates me. It bothers me. I don't like it. Right?
Yeah.
You can confront them directly. Maybe that'll do something. You can get into this antagonistic relationship where I'm going to say, then you probably should be writing your own material, because if you're enjoying getting them, get the cheater, then you should absolutely be writing your own content, right? Because that's the best.
Okay,
but this is what makes Gygax invent stuff like earworms, right? Like this is where this leads.
Right. This is my point. This is my point. Is that what the situation that you backed into there is very fundamentalist. It's very fundamental. That's actually kind of the play of D&D, of seeing that and then having the DM intentionally try to trick the players into bad play. And at one point, viewers feel free to say that you never want to be part of this kind of context. I respect that, but it was a standard part of, like, you think that you've broken the game with some kind of clever play, and yes, I come up with the rot grubs or the ear seekers or the mind worms or something like that, or some kind of some kind of crazy trap that does the opposite of what your expectations have become. And I will say that it can be simple. Like, if you are going to do that, if it, like in this particular case, Paul tried to have the conversation, and the participant wasn't straightforward with you about what was actually happening. So, I mean, what can how much can you do about that? So, if you do want to do this, I agree with some of our chat that's going by. It's a fairly simple. It just takes. You don't need to rewrite a lot of content. Just change where the treasure is. Just change where the treasure is and put a trap there instead. And for what it's worth, I mean, that actually is what we see in the auto scrambling adventures like Ravenloft or Thunder over Jotunheim. Is that there's 6 possible end goals, and the prize is in one of them, and the other 5 places have some horrible trap in them. Is kind of what happens in both of those cases. So just take where the goal is, just move that away, put a trap there, bam, it blows up in their face. That actually doesn't take a whole heck of a lot of effort.
Yeah.
And the other thing I want to point out is that the very first play report, if you look up online, the very first play report before Dungeons and Dragons was even published was Gary Gygax, and I can't remember like what wargaming journal it was now. It might have been Wargamers Journal, possibly, was like, we're playing this game and we're using our chainmail miniatures, but we're doing like fantasy stuff with Tolkien, elves and hobbits and dragons and ogres and stuff like that. And boy, we just ran a really great game because some players fought through the monsters, and then I had a treasure chest there, and they opened up the treasure chest, and basilisk guys popped out and turned all of them to stone. That's legitimately the first ever D&D play report was exactly that. And like how much pleasure Gygax got out of stoning the players when they thought that they had won. So feel free to dig into that.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm getting at. Like, if you enjoy that, if this is a pleasurable experience for you, by all means do it. Go for it. Yes. And I agree. We can talk about strategies and I think you're right. Moving the treasure is a classic. That's the ultimate, the problem, right? Like I can very flippantly say like, oh, just let go and just don't worry about the fact they're cheating, right? But no, it irritated me as well. I'll say when I was in this situation, it irritated me, right? And I felt the need to fight back. And so I did some of these things, right? Like move the treasure around. But it was just this constant little nag of like, oh, there's this little extra bit of work I got to do just to make it, feel more fair to me. And then I also have to deal with the ramifications of this subtle, where nobody's going to admit that cheating is happening, but me and this guy are going to give each other the stink eye across the table. As he goes, are you sure there's no treasure here? I search again. And I go, yeah, you found a trap. Save versus stone, right? Yeah. It gets very, I don't know. It's not a rapport I like at my table, right? And so I think ultimately at this point that, for me, the only real answer was just got to stop inviting this individual to play. They're not playing the game I want to play.
I mean, as painful as that sounds, honestly, and I don't wish this on anybody, I'm actually really glad that you've had this experience, Paul, to walk through that gauntlet. And I'll just very briefly say that as a college instructor, test security has this exact same vibe.
Yeah.
What you just described is exactly is what my mental state is trying to proctor tests, frankly. For exactly the same reason.
That's very irritating. Let's move on from this. Let's talk about
Totally.
the case of you have a player who's like, no, I love that game. It was great.
Yeah.
I would love here we go, Dan. I would love to play Tomb of Horrors again. You've run it for me at least twice. I want to play it again.
Agree. And this is predominantly right, and I agree with the cheating aspect is fundamentally rare in our experience. This is much more common in how this happens. And it's so funny you say that, Paul, because we were discussing this on the bus coming up to your place for your birthday last month, if I recall. So me, Max, and Lauren. I actually said this, or maybe actually it was while we were driving to HelgaCon, and I said I kind of want to rerun Tomb of Horrors. I think I could do a better job, frankly, than the last time I ran it. But everybody, the players that are in my games played it 10, 12-ish years ago, and somebody said exactly that. Probably none of us will remember any of it. And I'm like, well, that works out really well for me. That works out really well for me. And I would probably run it in a way that might not jog people's memories. Actually, I would probably attack it in it myself as the DM in kind of a different way myself now.
We've had whole episodes about Tomb of Horrors. I'm sure we've had a lot of discussion about it. So I'll just recommend folks, anybody who's really interested in this, go look it up. Yeah, I'm sure, and I think like the big one that always comes out to me is I'm sure one of the things you're going to tell me is, I'm just going to give you the riddle outright, right? Just going to, here you go, here's the riddle. Yeah, because I think that would be more fun, and I agree with that, and that would be great. Yeah, and I would enjoy it. Yeah, so to some degree, you could just lean on the how recently have they played it? Like if it's been a long time, maybe we can just have a conversation and go like, yep, I don't really remember it, and when a surprise comes up that I do remember, I'll take a back seat. I'll let the players who it's new for kind of drive the conversation on how to deal with the problem.
Yes,
I think that's a reasonable way to go about it. Dan, as long as we're talking about Tomb of Horrors, I feel like we should talk about its predecessor. Am I going to remember the Tomb of Rahotep? Is it Rahotep? Am I getting that right?
Exactly correct.
Now, viewers may remember that we ran this game live for the folks at WebDM, and I was a player in that, and you were running it, Dan, and I had definitely read it, and I knew the adventure well, and so our way around that was to play into the 2DM bad guy or what's our word for
the
that?
Adversary.
Play to the adversary role. And set them up, right? Basically, you had me play the game, and I said, great, I'm just going to, anytime it comes to problem solving, like I'll help with the adventure, I'll help with the fighting, and I'll help with the whatever, all the tactical stuff. But when it comes to like actual strategic decisions, I'll take a back seat. I'll let them decide what they want to do. And with the whole point of being, we had decided that my character was actually, I think, possessed by the spirit of Rahotep or something like that. And then turns out had been spying on them all along. And at the very end, I turn into the heel, and I am the villain they have to fight. Super fun. I thought that was super exciting. It was a great way for, to include me as a player who knew the content.
And we've done that twice. We did that in person at our house con, and then we did it online. We did that twice. So I think that that's a great option when there's one player that knows the adventure very deeply. So we had investigated that adventure for our purposes on the channel here, actually, together. And it's not that long. So you had really in-depth knowledge about what was happening there. And so you if there's one person with really deep knowledge, you can maybe pull them to the DM side. And it could be like we're talking about Paul here of have a traitor in the party. And that's a standard, D&D thing that happens in a lot of situations, usually an NPC. So setting it up with an actual human player there gives it kind of extra gusto for a couple reasons. Or you could just at the outset, you could just say, well, I mean, you can play on my side. You're right from the beginning. You're the adversary. You can run the monsters. Me, the DM, I can adjudicate, but you can just run all the monsters. And if you know the territory well, like the monsters would, you can use that to your strategic advantage of move around and find the rear of the party and things like that. And you could have a lot of fun using your knowledge from the other side of the table and start co-DMing like that. So there's a couple things you could do that to basically gank them onto the DM side of the screen with that knowledge. And that's worked out very well for us.
I'm curious as I think of like I'm thinking of like Tomb of Horrors. Like if you ran that again and I was a player in it, I feel like the only thing that I would really be potentially problematic is knowing about and spoiler alert for Tomb of Horrors, everyone. Not that we haven't spoiled that module 6 times on the show already. Is knowing about the fake ending. Right? I know that there is a fake ending that is not the real ending that looks like the fake ending and is supposed to fake us out. You have a solution for that? Like a big twist? There's a big twist in my adventure that is like dramatic and exciting like that. How do you deal with that?
I feel that's the hardest thing to probably solve. But I will say this: the couple of times that I've run it, it wasn't a big issue because at least my players, and it was at least one time it was BJ that was just flat out don't believe it. Like that was the least tricky. It was the least. The smallest roll bump of all in the entire adventure of like fake thing, fake monster. You killed it. Great. Celebrate. And at least BJ was like, don't believe it for a second. That was too easy. No way. And that slowed them down, not whatsoever. And they kept exploring after that point without any delay whatsoever. So at least in my experience, it's a non-issue in the first place. But maybe that was just BJ argument, being a really great player.
I don't know. I feel like your argument here is basically just that, like, the twist is not that important, right? The overall game is fun enough that if the twist is spoiled, it's still a fun game.
That's fair. That's fair. You can probably do that. That's one you might that would be harder to rewrite. That would be more work to rewrite certainly than moving treasures around. I agree. I
feel like if I were in your shoes, I would be tempted to find a way to make the fake ending the real ending. And just, or at least make it unclear enough that we go, oh, this could be a double bluff, right? And then have that moment of tension between the player who's played before and the DM of going, wait, is this the fake ending or the real ending? I don't know.
I hear that. Like in that particular case, there's quite a bit of content after it. So like with the swap the treasure around, and Tomb of Horrors is a little bit linear, all things considered. There's quite a, like if you actually made that the real ending, there's a whole lot of really interesting content that you'd be snipping off. But I nonetheless, that was also my first thought of like, would that possibly work? And I'm not seeing that in that particular case. Interesting. Now, okay. And the other thing I should mention, like Paul, when you were talking about your quilting practice for your campaigns. Now, I didn't think this was going to turn into that cheating conversation. What I thought you were going to say is I've got players at my table and I have a wide variety of publications that they might possibly stumble into. They didn't sign up for Adventure X, but someday they stumble into whatever, and then they recognize that this is the particular thing that they didn't know was on the table initially. And coincidentally, on the Discord server, just in the last couple of days, some of us have been talking about the fact that sometimes we lift parts of adventures. So you mentioned with Skull Mountain, I think Max, I believe, took part of that Skull Mountain, the part with the scary bridge, and moved it into Stonehell, I think, when we were running through it for a call.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a great set. Why wouldn't you steal it? Absolutely.
Yeah, right. Yep. And somebody said they were taking pieces, I think on the Discord server, someone was taking pieces from N1, I think Cult of the Lizard King or something like that. I've taken the evil temple out of Keep of the Borderlands and moved it someplace else. And my players I did not think my players were going to recognize it. I thought I was disguising it, and man, that didn't trick them at all. They were well. This is just the evil temple from Keeper on the Borderlands. So if you are cut pasting pieces, as many of us do, you might also run into that situation through no fault on the player's end. So you might have to deal with it like that. Okay, let's talk about what we did with Skull Mountain. So someone near the top of the hour was recollecting that I had some knowledge, and here I'm trying to remember who it was. Right, it was Steve K.
You're talking about the yeah. This is really more about the inspiration for it, right? Is that
right?
Skull Mountain module was inspired by a map in the Blue Book Holmes edition of D&D. That's just a side view map of a dungeon that was never detailed, right? Which is great, right? I think there's that's intentionally in Skull Mountain, right? Is this wink to the players of like, you're gonna recognize this map, haha. Right. But haven't you always wondered what's in here? Here it is.
So to be perfectly clear, I didn't read the adventure. I had intentionally, I knew of it for years, and I intentionally avoided it all these years. I never got it. I never cracked it open because I didn't want to actually taint my thinking about how the schematic could be filled out. But I had looked at the schematic many times. And I think, as I said on that stream, I had, within the week, I actually had it open on my desktop to do a little bit of work of how I would personally fill it out. So I've been looking at it within hours of being surprised that was going to be the game. So this could resemble someone that had briefly read a thing, right? Maybe just glanced at a map once or twice, hasn't studied it with the intent of breaking the game. And so, remind me what we did. How did you approach that for that game?
Yeah, in that case, because I knew that you would know this map, and I like that, right? Frankly, it's a fun part of this adventure is that it is a wink to people who have seen this map before. So I just said, like, yeah, you may. I said, Dan, you may recognize that, and I think that we will just find an excuse for your character to in-game have that knowledge. So please, by all means, bring it. Which I thought was fun. I enjoyed that.
So my dwarf character was like, well, I have the recollections from the inscriptions of my people, from my clan, and if I recall correctly, I think there's probably stairs down here somewhere around, and look out for possible pitfall traps up ahead nearby, which turned out to be the correct actually in that particular case. And I think there's some kind of large shaft around here to the bowels of the dungeon. Yeah. So I didn't know particular areas, and I didn't know particular traps.
And you can watch the Skull Mountain recap, folks, to hear us talk about this more. But really, the only thing that you really help the group circumvent, as far as I'm concerned, is that initial murder hole. The initial murder hole, you knew that the murder hole existed. You prevented everybody from blundering into that. That was great. But other than that, I think you as often gave them misinformation as information, which was delightful.
Okay.
You were like, right. I think this is part of what they call the pit. And I'm like, well, the pit exists and he's wrong. So, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Have fun with that, players.
The funny thing I'll say with the with that initial drop fall trap is that I was just guessing, because all it is on the original schematic is just the line from level 0 to level 1. There's just a line here, and it could be. And you could read that as a chimney to climb up. It could be a dumbwaiter. It could be an air shaft. And like I'm thinking, like, well, it might, or it might be a murder hole. So I was taking this like, if it was me, I'd make it a murder hole because that's the way I swing. And so that one, I feel like I got the D4 correct on that particular guess. And I got to say, I was delighted. I was actually really delighted that it actually was a murder hole, was my guess for what that line represented.
Right. I think this now borders on the like just replaying content, right? Like players may return to a location they've been before. And that's fun, right? And my classic, most favorite example of this is when my players, when I was running a campaign that had Stonehell in it, my players explored some of Stonehell. One of my players was taking very meticulous maps of Stonehell, but you know how players' maps go. They start in the wrong place, and then they got to write letters of where it connects. Mm-hmm. They make errors in figuring out exactly how right? There's miscommunication between the GM and the player. They miss something. They're not perfect, right? When his character ultimately died, I took all the maps from him. Fast forward years later, not years later, but at least a year later, my players decide, oh, we got to go into Stonehell again. And they say, we're going to go prepared. And they go and they talk to an NPC and say, do you have any maps? Has anybody ever been down there? And I have an NPC shopkeeper, Sage, who's like, aha, yes, some maps have surfaced, and I'll gladly sell them to you. And I literally sold their own maps back to them. And they didn't know that was what was going to happen, so it was just a delightful moment for me where they give me a bunch of money and I hand them maps that they drew. And of course they were dismayed. They were like, "Oh no, these maps are terrible!"
Right?
Oh no. That was really I enjoyed that a lot. So I think that's fun. Anytime you just want to play into it. Honestly, the other time this came up, actually, wait, I have this on my shelf. So okay, we're talking about our old friend BJ. I played in this campaign for this guy. Had this campaign running for a long time. When we originally started, BJ had joined, and he was keeping a blog, and he was writing in-character journals about his experience, right? In-character journals about his experience exploring my world. Eventually, he had to move away, unfortunately. But the group continued, and we continued to play without him. I actually took his blog. I have it here.
Yeah, right. Oh, I remember
found
this.
it into a book called The Chronicles of Deacon Silver. That was his character's name. And this is just a printout of his actual blog of what he experienced. And I told players, this exists in the world. This is a thing you can go to a shop and buy the Chronicles of Deacon Silver, and you can read them. And if you do, and that brings you information about, the world that is to your advantage, kudos to you.
That's amazing.
And it was just super fun. It's super fun. Like, it is a lot of writing. He wrote a lot of words. So I was like, great. Yeah, please go read BJ's blog. That's great.
Completely next level. So that's the PhD level DMing. If you have someone that's effectively written a whole book, someone else has written an entire book from the perspective of one of the players, and you hand that to your later players, that viewers, this is not a level that I've ever accomplished. I'm pretty jealous of that Paul has managed to reach that particular pinnacle, because this is not something I've ever done myself. That's totally
you don't need anything this crazy. I remember, I'm also reminded, I took this idea once to a convention game where it was a piece of my home campaign that I had just lifted out into a one-shot convention game, and I had a bunch of handouts that could potentially provide a clue, not a significant one, but a clue to the actual gameplay. And so at the very beginning of the adventure, I said, here's a bunch of background information that you can read. It was like, I don't know, 5 or 6 pages. And I was like, here's background information you have, research you've done about the world, about what's going on here. Feel free to read it. It's just flavor. It's just giving you context. It's not, you can absolutely do this adventure without it. But sure enough, I had one player dig into it and read it all.
Right.
And then later on, there was an encounter with a Sphinx, and I had to make up a riddle on the fly. And so my riddle was just about a funny question about something that had happened historically in the world. And it was a trick question, right? Like I gave him, did A or B happen? And the answer was neither, right? That's a trick question. And he got it. He was a delightful moment for him, because he's like, wait, I've read about this. It's here, right? And this is a trick question. And he was excited. The whole table was excited. They're like, what? How did you saved us from getting attacked by the Sphinx? You're our hero. Right? It's just such a good moment.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So if it is someone you trust, right? Someone you trust, and maybe they have like mid-level knowledge, like maybe like I did with Skull Mountain, or BJ did with these things. And I will say that for both me and BJ as players, we definitely would always have deep knowledge of like the monsters in the game and generally the spells. And I certainly encourage from players, and I think you're the same, Paul, encourage using your knowledge of classic D&D monsters to your advantage. I expect the players to know that you need to use fire on a troll, and you should please don't act like you don't know that. So when we're players, and you can see this a little bit in our Skull Mountain run through, other players would frequently look to either me or BJ for advice about, do you know about this particular monster? Is this kind of a trap that we can probably get through, this kind of thing? And so I personally encourage that. And if you have a player like that you can have an honest conversation with and gauge how deep the knowledge is that they're able to provide, that actually works really nicely as a character who's an expert dungeon delver, kind of giving additional assistance, and that works really well in world. And we've had a lot of good times with that kind of someone just a little bit more informed. Not they don't know everything, just a little bit more informed, and it's actually really nice play. And sometimes wrong, but many times helpful.
Yeah. I think that there's probably a common fear that teams will have to push against you to do this, which is like, well, but then it'll become a cakewalk. It'll be too easy. They'll just get right through it. And I would lean into some of my favorite Jeffrian's advice, which is give your players the moon and make them fight for the stars. Right? Like, it's okay to give your players big, hefty things, whether that's a giant, exciting magic item, or letting them cakewalk through an encounter by being clever, or just having past knowledge and bringing it to the table. Because there's so many ways for you as DM to screw them over later. It's fine. Give them that one thing. They will undoubtedly, make their lives miserable some other way.
It's a theme that I keep coming back to lately, is that the players having more information is really more interesting play. Is they really interesting decisions that they can key off and leverage their advantage. And so I continue to learn more all the time that, frankly, the more information they have is usually better for the game. And I don't, life is hard enough. I don't need to work to screw them over anymore.
And the players are pretty good at screwing themselves over. They don't need that much help from you as the DM to do that. Dan, before we run out of time, there's one other thing I wanted to mention here. Just curious about another thought that's popped into my head about this stuff. Like I keep thinking about, you talked about wanting to rerun Tomb of Horrors. The one for me is, frankly, Dyson Stealth, right? I had so much fun running that. I would love to run that again. But like all my best players have played it, and we streamed it, so like maybe it's too well known. One thought I had is, well, what about you have a group of players who played the content before, you want to rerun the content, change the system, change the setting, use the same content.
Interesting.
What do you think?
Well, I know that you've run the altered version of the giant zombie ice cavern thing. What am I trying to say here?
Yes.
I know that Paul has an adventure where he's done this kind of thing before. We took what was a fantasy adventure and turned it into a sci-fi type thing. I don't have a lot of experience with that. I tend to, clearly you'd have to do some work, right? That would be some labor on the DM's end. Someone in our chat has to know what the hell I'm talking about.
The Lamentations of the Flame Princess adventure. Right. Death Frost Doom. There we go. I got it into my head.
Death Frost Doom. Thank you so much. Death Frost Doom. That's exactly what I'm thinking about. Turned it from fantasy into sci-fi. Apparently it worked really well for you that time. I remember I was in the building. I wasn't playing. I was in the building, and I remember hearing someone talking with a robot voice from the other room. Actually, I think they had a digital voice scrambler or something like that, and so they were talking. I remember hearing the robot talking from the other room. Like that seems like a really compelling game that's happening right there. I can't use myself as a data point because I feel like I want to say I'd remember quite a bit, but maybe not. Maybe I'd have to run. Maybe I have to run the experiment. Maybe we have to run the experiment and find out how much I actually remember.
There you go. Okay. Yeah, I think it would be interesting. I'd have to think about what to run it in, and even just the system, right? Like instead of D&D, I'm going to run it as Quest or something, right? Like maybe that makes it interesting. I don't know. But again, it's maybe easier to run that kind of content when it is a fantasy adventure exploration game. Very dungeon crawly. It's a little easier to rerun than something where there's like lots of twists and surprise information to find, right?
Agreed with that. Agreed with that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Dan, we're out of time. Any final thoughts on rerunning content for players who've already?
I think you have a lot of options here. Actually, this is not one of these super problematic issues. So I think from like the things we scoped out, if like on like level 1, your players might not really remember. So you might just play through and have no problem at the outset because they're going to have less memory about it than you do as a top level DM who's done your homework. So that just might not be a problem. If it's mid-level knowledge, then you can do what we've done with me and our friend BJ of like, well, it's a character in the world. It has some rumors and some information, a little bit more advice to the rest of the party. And there's a really nice interplay about how much do you trust them, which works out really well. If they have like completely encyclopedic knowledge, then you might think about pulling them on the DM's side as the adversary and using all that information against the other players for a real change of pace. And this assumes that that you've got players that are open to the issue that you can have an honest conversation with about, obviously. And then if it's someone that is doing it intentionally to break your game, or cheat the game, then just hit them with a lightning bolt from the blue. Just zap them with just random traps, complete, death, save or die stuff, cloaks of poison. Just all the gloves are off, kids, and you can as DM feel free to do anything you freaking want because you have license at that point. But it's very rare, and you'll probably never run into that. So don't worry about that part.
Yeah, I think I'm still gonna lean on just consider who you invite to your table, and maybe if it's not really fun, maybe make a change.
Listen to Paul. That makes sense.
The mid-level one is super fun, and I would encourage folks who haven't tried it to lean into that, especially because often our memories are not great. And so it is actually quite enjoyable, I've found as DM, to watch the player who has knowledge to go, I think it's this, maybe, right? Because let me tell you, as much as they may be right or wrong, even when they're dead on right, the lack of confidence that they instill in the rest of the party is hilarious. And just watching them squirm as they try to decide whether or not to follow the advice of the person who allegedly knows but isn't sure is delightful.
One of my favorite parts from our Skull Mountain play, and I had no idea this was in it whatsoever, was the demon with the totally pitch black mouth. To which I got to say, well, I've seen things like this in the past, and this is either instant certain death or the only way forward. so consider your options carefully.
Yep, that's delightful. Viewers, if you have thoughts on the best way to deal with a player who has played your content before, or tales of woe from a cheater that has vexed you, please leave them in the comments section of our YouTube video here. We would love to hear from you. I don't know, maybe we'll do a whole episode on cheating or whatever. We definitely get a lot of inspiration from our viewers, and we would love to hear from you.
Definitely. And of course, remember that you can like, follow, and subscribe to us on places like YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, TikTok, Loops, GitHub, places like that. We have the handle Wandering DMs on all those sites. So please look for us there and resurrect that like button.
If you prefer to listen to our show in audio-only podcast format, you can do so. Those podcasts are hosted on our website at wanderingdms.com. They're also available through various third-party carriers such as iTunes, Spotify, and Pocket Cast. If you're listening to this show right now on one of those other sites and it gives the ability to do so, please rate and review our show. That helps other users of that site find us, and we really appreciate it.
We really do. And of course, huge thanks to our patrons who support the show here. If you'd like to join them, please visit patreon.com/wanderingdms. And just like Paul said at the top of the hour, every tier gets you access to our private Discord server where the conversation continues round the clock about fantasy gaming and science fiction, miniatures, and all the stuff that we adore. And we will be there in about 10 minutes to continue the conversation for any points that we missed here in our live video after chat. So we hope that you'll join us. We had a bunch of people last week, we had a blast last Sunday. So looking forward to that again today. We are planning on being back next Sunday as always. So we try to be we try to be live every Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern time, and that's what's going to happen. So please join us again next week for another thought-provoking discussion.
We'll see you then.